Hi, I'm George Kistner, the port historian. Did you know that Port Canaveral recently marked its 70th anniversary? A vision that took over 75 years to bring to life. The port you see today bears little resemblance to its humble beginnings. On November 4th, 1953, Port Canaveral was officially dedicated with the USS McClellan proudly moored at the West Marginal Wharf. The ceremony drew a crowd of 2,600 attendees and was presided over by then Senator and former Florida Governor Spessard Holland Sr. In his address, Senator Holland called Port Canaveral our nation's port for inner and outer space, linking the port's significance to the nation's emerging space program. In the early days, Port Canaveral was not much more than a hole in a muddy channel, nestled on the north side with a small warehouse and a few fishing boats. Our role back then was to be a drop point for commercial fishing and fuel distribution. It was just a few years later when the port welcomed its first commercial cargo vessel, the SS Merrimack Spruce. But the commercial trade significance of Port Canaveral was just beginning to be realized. By 1966, cargo tonnage had surged to a staggering 1 million tons per year, signifying our rapid ascent as a major gateway. Today, the port's cargo throughput has grown exponentially, with an annual discharge of nearly 7 times that initial figure. Nearly 3 decades passed before the first cruise ship, the Scandinavian Sea, found its permanent berth at Port Canaveral. With the growing allure of Orlando's theme parks and the surging appeal of Cocoa Beach nearby, the cruise industry began to take notice of our port. As we entered our 4th decade, it was undeniable that indeed we were a growing port in a growth market. From that point forward, there was no turning back. Early on in our history, the United States military underscored the strategic significance of Port Canaveral, with naval vessels having a regular presence in this newly created seaport. It's well known that Port Canaveral's history has intertwined with the space industry. Throngs of rocket watchers flocked to our port and nearby Cocoa Beach to witness historical launches that were the promise and precursor for human space travel. In the early days of the U.S. space program, our port was the scene of colossal Apollo rocket boosters strapped onto barges transiting through the Canaveral Lock. Today, our port continues to play an important role in the 21st century space program, supporting a growing commercial space industry and welcoming a new generation of space enthusiasts eager to celebrate their success. That sleepy, muddy-watered Port Canaveral of back then has grown to be one heck of a thriving maritime powerhouse today.
700,000 travelers,
1.7 million passengers.
Port Canaveral is now the
busiest port now.
The biggest in the world.
The world's busiest cruise port.
#1 port for cruises
in the entire world.
And we are busy. And we're busy because we're an easy port to get to, an easy port to get through, and the best experience you'll have boarding and departing a vessel of any port in the United States. We now have some of the latest and newest tonnage in the world on our cruise fleet. That's a big driver for why people want to come to Port Canaveral, because we do have some of the best ships in the world. Port Canaveral is very much a hands-on port. Even in our cruise operations, we have a very large cruise operations team that's facilitating traffic, parking, guest directions, etc., to make sure that our guests have the ultimate experience getting to and from the ship. As we view our business as we're the first and the last thing that the cruise guest sees before they get on or off the ship. Our goal is to make that as seamless as possible. The bigger ships come to Port Canaveral because we deliver. The ships are full. That's a big plus for us. If we can fill a ship every week, then that's a benefit to the cruise lines. I think our biggest innovation right now is our new parking system that we're rolling out. Cruise guests at Port Canaveral all pay on arrival, so that expedites the vessel when the vessels return from voyage, and because of the advancements in customs and border protection and facial recognition, it allows the guests to get off the ship almost immediately. So by paying on entry, it allows people to get to the car and then immediately flow out without having to stop. We've got two ships right now, the Mardi Gras and the Disney Wish, that are powered with liquefied natural gas. We were the pioneer in cruise ports in the United States for LNG fuel supply. Next year we'll have the Utopia of the Seas coming in for Royal Caribbean. That's also a natural gas powered ship. And the Disney Treasure will come in at the end of the year, also natural gas. So we'll have 4 ships next year by the end of the year that are natural gas powered vessels. Our goal at Port Canaveral is to provide the best guest experience to our cruise line customers. And by doing that, we ensure repeat customers coming back to the port, and it ensures our growth in the cruise industry. We're very excited for the future. We have some great assets coming online in the next few years and a lot of surprises for the business as a whole.
Out of service for 9 years, this ribbon cutting reopens Port Canaveral's North Cargo Berth 3 with nearly 900 feet of new dock space for larger ships.
Port Canaveral is expanding their cargo capabilities by rebuilding North Cargo Bay 3.
But now, after a roughly $50 million renovation, the port says it's welcoming its first deliveries to the new dock.
You know, our cargo business has grown significantly in the last few years. It's largely been driven by the construction boom in Central Florida. A lot of our materials that come through the port are aggregates that are used in highway construction and in building construction. We also have had significant fuel deliveries. We are a main supplier for Orlando International Airport as well as 3 other airports in the area. It's been busy. When we shut a port down for a weather event, we have the last cargo to stop running is fuel, and the first cargo to start when the port reopens is fuel. And that's because in Florida, many places we have a mandatory evacuation, and people need fuel to get out of the state or out of wherever they're being evacuated from, and then they need fuel to get back home. Fuel for generators, fuel for all sorts of things, and that's why our fuel supply is so critical, particularly during a weather event. The other piece of business that's been very active for us is the space industry. The recovered boosters from offshore come back into Port Canaveral, and they're recovered at our cargo docks. And sometimes that's a multi-day event, and that's become a very active part of our cargo business as of late. We're bringing a second mobile harbor crane because our gantry cranes that were built back in the early 1970s are functionally obsolete, and it's time to improve. So this gives us a lot more flexibility and capabilities going forward into the future.
Industrial, space, cargo, and of course, cruise.
Warm, the port's taken a big step toward expanding too, beyond just a spot to hop on a cruise.
The port needs more garage space.
We have 2 garages under construction. One will be adjacent to Cruise Terminal 6. The other one will be at Cruise Terminal 10. We also have a very, very large flat lot development at Cruise Terminal 1 in anticipation of the new larger ships that'll be coming in the next year. And we're building both garages in anticipation of new services, which will start at the end of 2024. We also have Disney Cruise Line bringing a 3rd vessel to the port toward the end of the year. And we will also, for next winter season, have both Princess Cruise Line and Celebrity Cruise Line operating from the Northside terminals. We just completed our renovation of North Cargo Berth 3, and we are in construction with North Cargo Berth 4 right now. We expect that to be finished sometime in the 3rd quarter of 2024. These 2 docks have been out of service for more than 10 years. We started with North Cargo Berth 3, and we have had our first ship there in June of 2023. The new dock will be a total length of close to 1,800 feet, which will allow us to put 2 vessels there at the same time. We also have a continuing need to support the space industry, and these docks will help us in that endeavor as well. Many of our tenants, port tenants on the cargo side, have had significant capital investments over the last year or so. Heidelberg Materials has just expanded their primary slag production facility, which will give it about another 50% more capacity than it had before. Seaport Canaveral just recently installed all new fuel lines above dock. So they went through a significant investment and raised everything so they're elevated along berth 1 and 2. ASI has been purchased by a company called Instructure, which is now the largest bulk and break bulk operator in the United States. Instructure has been investing in our port and in infrastructure, and we're talking to them about additional facilities such as warehouses and other properties that they will be able to bring new business through Port Canaveral. The road infrastructure in and out is the lifeline to the port. We have one way in, one way out on State Road 528. There are plans for that road to be expanded, and that is one of our critical roadways that needs to be improved. Also, the 401 bridge, Route 401, goes to the north side of the port. That's where all of our cargo operations, the majority of our cargo operations with Heidelberg and Seaport Canaveral, there's trucks coming over that bridge every day. There are drawbridges that are functionally obsolete. The challenge we have is that they get stuck open on occasion, and that interrupts cruise guests. This past year, we did almost 6.8 million cruise guests in 1 year. So the traffic on the road, both from the cargo side and the cruise side, has increased exponentially. And as a result, we need the infrastructure improvements outside the port in order to continue our growth. We've done a lot with some of the public safety grants that we've gotten. We have bollards, safety bollards. We're upgrading our lighting systems throughout the port, our traffic systems. We'll be doing that next year at Cruise Terminal 1. We've got a project to widen the turn lane into the terminal and add some directional signaling. We've got a new fire truck coming for Canaveral Fire and Rescue. We have a new boat coming for Brevard County Sheriff's Office for their marine safety operations. We continue to upgrade our equipment as needed for the benefit of all of our cruise guests having a safe passage to and from their ship. You know, all of our development and projects that we're doing at Port Canaveral contribute to the overall community and jobs and economic prosperity for our region and the Canaveral Port District and for the state of Florida. We're a very busy port. The more business we do, the more economic benefit there is to the state and to the community as a whole.
What an incredible journey it's been. In just 70 years, we've witnessed the remarkable transformation of Port Canaveral. From our humble beginnings to our vital role as an economic powerhouse today. One thing's for certain, there's simply no port quite like Port Canaveral.